WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Live on WFLA Now, this is Hey JB. Here's JB Biunno.
The biggest unanswered question in the brutal stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students remains this: why? Today we look at the evidence, and alongside our special guest expert in the Stream Center, we're breaking down the hunt for a motive, live on WFLA Now. Hello there to you folks, JB here with you, live across all platforms. We're really going to be featuring a lot of your comments in this upcoming stream alongside retired FBI Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer joining us here live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. Jennifer, this is our first time together, you and I, in the Stream Center. Welcome in.
Thank you so much. Your center is beautiful, and how impromptu and fun to be here. Good to be here.
Jennifer was in town. We could not pass on the opportunity to bring her in and talk about several key cases, including, of course, we're going to lead here talking about the situation regarding Idaho. We're also, later on in the stream, going to be going over what's going on in the search for missing Massachusetts mother Ana Walshe. We'll also be talking a little bit about the lawsuit between the families of Gabby Petito and Bryan Laundries. But I want to begin this live stream, Jennifer, by talking about the very latest in the Idaho student murders. We're talking, of course, now about a 5-month delay between now and the next pretrial hearing. A lot of questions to get answered, but really the question that has remained from day one, really since the arrest of suspect Bryan Kohberger, the question since day one, since the remains of the 4 students were found in that house on Kings Road, is why. And this is the question that people want answered more than any other.
Right. It's so hard to understand, JB, how someone who was a PhD student, who had no criminal record, who was much like many students on campus, TAs and so forth, somebody seemingly pretty normal, could commit this heinous of a crime, true atrocities here. So what we have to look at is different writings that we now have that we believe that are attributed to him, as well as the exact crime and nature themselves. And then some footage that we have with his interaction with his father, to me, that was a little bit telling in terms of control. And you add that all together, and I think we can paint at least a possible picture based on these this information.
So his profile, his makeup, his character, and his experiences earlier on in life, how does that inform us as to what we're dealing with now as he is a suspect in the murders of these 4 students?
Well, certainly the lack of empathy and the situation regarding a lot of his writings, the darkness that you can see there, JB. Somebody who is capable of committing this type of murders, lacks empathy. They don't feel for their victims. They overcome their victims in a powerful and controlling way. And that was certainly indicated in this case.
Yeah, and what was the most striking thing, Jennifer, that we have learned is we talked about this on stream as soon as Kohberger was arrested, as soon as he started to appear in court, and as soon as we started to hear more and more from various people that he has worked with or known in his life. We knew that there was going to be this massive effort underway to dig into his past. Social media to me is so tricky because you think that you know who is actually behind the accounts, but you never really know. I'm sure somebody could make a copycat account of just about anybody out there. So you never really know for certain who's behind the posts or shares or comments that come from various accounts, and that can get tricky from time to time. However, when it comes to digging into his past, what is the number one thing that has stuck out to you over the course of this discovery process, as we have a suspect now who is accused of these crimes?
Well, the number one thing that stuck out was his area of study. Quite interesting. And it's something that we've seen with other prolific killers in our history, individuals who study crime and who study exactly the criminal justice system, how it works, and they know about it. So that was, of course, the first thing that stuck out to me as somewhat unique, but not entirely unique for people who commit these crimes.
I'm always looking at paperwork, and I'm going to go back to the probable cause affidavit. And as we learn more and more about his makeup, his character, and I want to make this clear, and we should have said this at the very beginning of the stream. We're, of course, talking about a suspect in this case, innocent until proven guilty. This is somebody who is accused in these crimes, but somebody who has said through his legal representation that he is going to look for every means possible to be exonerated and to clear his name. However, he is innocent until proven guilty. While the court of public opinion and the court of law, they differ. You and I know this, Jennifer. In the court of law, he is innocent until proven guilty. But I want to go to the evidence. I want to go to the probable cause affidavit, because while we're learning more about who Bryan Kohberger was and is to this point in his life, what the connection is and the connection that exists between him and the four victims. And the one thing that I keep going back to, Jennifer, is page 16. And I'm going to read just the entirety of the paragraph here. And this is, we talked about digital forensics on previous streams. I want to go over the cell phone activity regarding Bryan Kohberger. On December 23rd, 2022, pursuant to that search warrant, I received historical records for the phone from AT&T from the time that the account was opened in June of 2022. After consulting with CAS-SA, I was able to determine estimated locations for the phone from June 2022 to present, the time period authorized by the court. The records for the phone showed that the phone was utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to the area of the King Road residence on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th, 2022. On all of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. Basically, what that translates to is that Bryan Kohberger's cell phone was pinged in the area of the Kings Road residence 12 times before the date of the murders. And this to me, this is the biggest circle that I have, I think, around any of the digital forensics in this probable cause affidavit, because it establishes at least some form of a connection, a historical connection of some kind between Bryan Kohberger and the victims. So I'm going to ask our comment section to partake in this. And I'm just going to ask you, we're going to talk about this generally for a second, Jennifer. Okay.
Great.
What is a college student going to a neighboring town for 12 times before the date that the four students are found dead? What is a college student doing going to this house or the area of this house 12 times? All answers are on the table. Use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJennifer to let me know what a normal college student or non-normal, it doesn't matter, just a college student in general is doing, going to the same house repeatedly over and over and over again, late at night, early morning hours. What do you think it is?
Well, the translation from an investigative eye, certainly, JB, is that he was there conducting what we call in the business a site survey. You know, when are these individuals awake? When are these individuals going to sleep? What's the activity going in and out of that house? He's basically looking at this as the target location. Again, if he indeed did commit these crimes, through my investigator lens, that's what I see. If I'm the defense counsel, perhaps I see, well, someone who was looking to party and to have a good time, and this was a well-known apparent party location, and maybe he was just going there to see if he could come upon a party to go to. So it certainly depends on your lens.
Let's go to some of the comments. I think that you're on the same thread that our commenters are on, Jennifer. Tracy says, #KJB. You would go over to a neighboring town 12 times late at night, early morning hours to visit your girlfriend. That's one thing. Brittany says the good shopping, which of course is a sly reference to Kohberger's comments while behind bars in reference that he was going to Idaho, saying that the shopping there was I believe it was better. Okay, so we have this comment, #KJB, he's going 12 times, seems like he's stalking. Perhaps there's one person in particular. But yes, another comment that I am seeing over and over and over again in our comment section as well is this one, like from Joan, that a college student would be making that trek over to a neighboring town for drugs. Maybe, look, college students, whether it's illegal drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, whatever it might be, or drugs that, Adderall is so prevalent when it comes to colleges, universities across the country. That's another thing that is coming up here. So the fact that we have these cell phone pings 12 times before November 13th, late at night, early morning hours, tells us that he has some very distinct connection to this place. And why he has that connection is really the mystery. And the FBI, you can now point us in the right direction as far as the FBI investigation. They have this information. This is precious information. They're able to ascertain that based on the cellular location of the suspect, that he was going to this place repeatedly. But then how do you take that and then establish why he was going to that place repeatedly?
Well, you have to look at the totality of everything that investigators know. We not only have the cell phone pings, we've also got the video surveillance that involve the white Elantra. We also have what ended up happening, which was a murder took place and a sheath was left behind with connected to his DNA on the sheath.
Right.
So when you add that all together and you take the totality of all of that, it's so important because it does place him there. And I think that is one of the reasons they were able to charge this as a first-degree premeditated murder. Part of that premeditation they needed to prove is based on the cell phone pings.
The cell phone pings to me are so interesting. And then, of course, you have the cell phone ping afterwards. The cell phone ping that comes in the 9 o'clock hour, the morning that of course, the students were found deceased at the Kings Road residence. What do you make of the cell phone ping and the aftermath of the murders believed to have taken place around the 4 a.m. hour? So then, of course, you have this return trip by the suspect. What does an FBI investigator think when he sees the return trip?
When I see that return trip, and we've seen it before, they are going back to sort of look at their handiwork. What is happening? Has it been discovered? I'm sure he believed there would be police everywhere and ambulances and coroner's car, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure he would have thought there would have been more activity than there was there. The other interesting possibility is he knew the sheath was gone. Did he go back unsure where the sheath had been dislodged? Could it have been in the wooded area? Could it have been in and around? Could he have looked for it? So I think it's a two-pronged situation.
I find this question to be interesting. It comes in from Nicho, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Nico, #HJB. Does Jennifer believe that Bryan slashed the killer? And I appreciate the slash there because Bryan is, again, the alleged suspect, had been in the house before that night. Again, I'll read it again. Does Jennifer believe that Bryan / the killer had been in the house before that night? Did he know where he was going? This question is asking about familiarity with the house and the victims.
JB, I believe that that's very possible, and I even more so believe the defense will say this, that he was there. And use that as an explanation of any DNA, any fingerprints, even the sheath of how it got there. We know that there were parties that were there where the individuals weren't there. And so it was not controlled access, seemingly, at least from the body cam footage that we have and the assertions that are made during that footage. So whether he was there or not, I would not at all doubt he was. And I think the defense will use that.
Let's go to this comment. And it's Steven who's agreeing with you here. Hashtag AJB. He realized he left the sheath and wanted to see if he could retrieve it. I want to make sure that we're making sure that we're framing this comment correctly. This is Steven, his opinion as to why Bryan Kohberger, again, allegedly went back to the scene. Again, was it to retrieve a piece of evidence? Was it to examine the scene to see if there were, cops up and down the street, so on and so forth? That's the comment from Steven. This one from it's either Queens or Eames. Hashtag KJB. What defense do you think that Bryan Kohberger will be mounting, given the fact he requested a preservation of the crime scene? I had the lawyer, Peter Tragos in here. We talked a lot in our previous stream, and I encourage our audience to find it because we really talked about this case and where it goes going forward. But the defense now, he has 5 months, in essence, 5 months, to prepare a defense and to poke holes into the evidence, basically to poke a hole, multiple holes, into this probable cause affidavit. What do you think? What do you think that his legal team might be up to as far as preparing for that next pretrial hearing?
Well, particularly regarding the question in the crime scene, a crime scene reconstructionist is looking at things like, and this is, I think, very important, voids. They're looking at where blood spatter isn't. The reason is that gives the shape and so forth of the person, the height possibly of the person that perpetrated this crime. So when you look where evidence isn't, it can be very hopeful to reconstructing a crime. And I think the defense will try to look at that and point holes in why it wouldn't be him, someone of his stature, someone of particularly his height, his build. And so they're going to be looking at that from a crime scene analyst perspective. It was very important for them to save that crime scene so at least another expert could go in and take a look. And JB, I think they're going to be trying to poke holes in the 2011-2013 Elantra issue. It ended up being a 2015. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, I was with you when the officer said 2015, and I looked at you and I said, did I just hear him say 2015?
And I remember I wasn't sure because I was so used to hearing 2011, 2012, 2013. And then when the 2015 thing dropped, that's more significant than people realize when it comes to, legally what's going to transpire going forward. It
was so significant in that I could never understand why our cadre of analysts throughout the United States studying 22,000 cars within that range had not made more progress over a short amount of time, having been involved in those. There's so many working and they can get through the analysis so quick. And I could never understand why it was taking so long. Well, they were looking for the wrong car.
That's right.
And that was problematic. But I think what the defense will try to skew is that, well, your perpetrator has a 2011 through 2013 Elantra, and that's not my guy. Now, anyone looking closely, when you look at the shape, differences in the body style from an 11 through 15.
So slight.
So slight. And that expert went back, revisited the video, looked at it. I think we're going to see a completely different date on his reexamination. And he's going to show why it could also be, I think he said through 2016 even.
Jennifer Coffindaffer here with us live in the WFLA Now Stream Center as we're welcoming in our digital audience across all platforms. Welcome into the Stream Center. And we have this question that just came in from Shaman Girl, hashtag AJB. And Jennifer, won't they, of course, the defense for Kohberger, be looking for other DNA? And this is kind of a massive question. I'm very glad that Shaman Girl brought this up in our comment section because it's a college residence there's going to be DNA profiles of all different sorts in that house. So how much is that part of the process now for the defense, in your opinion?
It's huge. And another reason, back to that whole crime scene examination by their expert, the FBI and specifically the Idaho State Police evidence recovery team that worked there, they are going to have exactly where they retrieve different samples of DNA in that crime scene, JB. So all of that's going to be tagged and marked and illustrated. And this defense is going to look at all that and say, well, look at all this DNA from this person and this DNA from this person. And if it's been evaluated, if not, the defense can have it evaluated. So it's going to cause some problems, some big problems. But at the end of the day, the sheath DNA is going to carry the day, I believe.
On the sheath and on the murder weapon, Capri Smith wants to know, #KJB, #KJennifer. I'm so glad that you're here to answer this question because this has come up on stream. And I've wanted to ask you this question in particular. Do you think that they have the murder weapon now? It is a big question that we're getting. And the reason is because this, of course, the probable cause affidavit is weeks old now. And also, too, at the same time, there's the gag order that has come out. So there's no talking about this from a law enforcement perspective. So now you have people asking online, look, if they were to have found the murder weapon over the weekend, we as the public wouldn't know, correct? I mean, Moscow, right. Idaho police, the FBI, would that come out via leak, via law enforcement sources speaking, in your opinion?
I don't think it would come out, JB. Look, it didn't come out about DM, as I'll call her in the affidavit, that she witnessed. A lot of things did not come out. The sheath didn't come out, which was really the smoking gun, if you will, in this situation. So I don't think the murder weapon recovery would be exposed. They've conducted 4 search warrants, really 5. One was of his person. They've done the apartment. They've done the office. They've done, the house, the car. Normally, if this were a more accomplished criminal, I would say he ditched it. It's gone. Yeah. But if it is Mr. Kohberger, he has made so many egregious mistakes using his own car, having his cellular phone, having his sheath, to extract the knife from, leaving it behind, that it's possible he could have kept that in his apartment and it could be found. So it's a big possibility.
In the aftermath of the 4 students being found dead and the fact that weeks had gone on without there being a suspect or even a person of interest, there was this idea online, and this idea that came to be online in comment sections on Twitter, on various channels on the internet, that we were dealing with a quote-unquote mastermind, that whoever did this was so meticulous with their process and how that they were able to leave so little behind and get away with it, so to speak, as it was believed to be at the time. And now, in your opinion, as far as the moves that he made, the decisions that he made based on, again, allegations, these are all allegations, innocent until proven guilty. The intelligence level of the person that we are dealing with here is what exactly, in your opinion?
Well, I think he's very intelligent. How many of us have been accepted into a PhD program, been a student teacher from an academic book smart standpoint? I don't think that can be denied per se, but there's such a difference between common sense and really logically thinking through things. And I give him some credit because it did take law enforcement 7 weeks to solve this. And I know they were onto him somewhat earlier than that, but I don't think a lot earlier than that. And so I have to give him credit, JB. But mastermind, no.
It goes to show that even if, let's say that you are average intelligence or above average intelligence, or let's say even you're highly intelligent, even highly intelligent individuals can make mistakes. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Well, and I believe that the mistakes made were more as a result of him being narcissistic, JB. Him thinking he was going to get away with the perfect crime due to preparation, due to the time of entry, due to choosing a very soft target. All the things he did right became overshadowed by the few he did wrong, because I think he just thought he could outsmart law enforcement.
So that brings us back to motive. Sophia wants to know, #HJB, what do we know about the motive? What do we know about the motive? We know oh so little about motive. Motive is so elusive in this case because you're trying to establish some kind of a connection pre-November 3rd, or excuse me, November 13th, between suspect and victims, right? If you are, I'm almost imagining, and you can tell me if this is just CSI talking or if this is just, the glamour of TV. Is there a big whiteboard at Moscow Police Headquarters, and do they have motive with a big circle around it on the whiteboard with a question mark on it? I mean, is that what is actually going on when you have investigators trying to determine motive for a crime this high profile?
Well, the biggest thing to keep in mind, of course, is they don't need to prove a motive. Motive is not required by the statute. It's not required to get a conviction, but juries want to know why. They want to understand. And when you can put a motive to this crime, it helps them to be able to be more understanding, if you will, of the evidence, because they see why. In this case, from the beginning, I've believed it was a femicide type case, an incel type action, someone that has felt rejected and felt emptied and felt no empathy and, in fact, loathed women. That's my belief based on the severity of the crime, based on the targets that were chosen, based on watching his controlling nature to a loved one, his father, based on the writings that I've since seen that are attributed to him when he was younger. That's just the picture that I believe exists. And only Mr. Kohberger, if he did do this, only he will be able to truly tell us why.
Very interesting. We're going to go more in depth into, of course, Bryan Kohberger's, his makeup, his demeanor. Of course, there's so much more ahead with this story. I want to give everybody just really quickly, while we have Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI agent and now FBI expert and analyst, joining us here in the Stream Center. This is the last call for questions, because what we're going to do, we're going to move on. I want to talk about Ana Walshe. I want to talk about developments with some interesting developments with the lawsuit and new evidence that has still come to light in the Gabby Petito Bryan Laundries story. We're going to try to make the most of Jennifer's time while she's physically here with us. Love having you on Zoom, but also being able to hit the touchscreen button here and take you to this wide shot and show Jennifer physically in the room with us here in Tampa Bay. It's just a treat. It's a treat to be able to break things down with you in person. Of course, it's great to have you, and thank you for coming in. So, LV wants to know, #AJB, what things does Jennifer think about Bryan if he is the killer, asking from her FBI background? You want to just quickly, as I look for a couple more comments on this, do you want to answer LV?
Yes. LV, these types of crimes, something this heinous and something this unique in terms of the selection of the victims, doesn't happen often. It truly is rare. We in the true crime community seem to surround ourselves by it, so it seems not as unusual, but it's rare, LV. And so are many of the other aspects of this case, particularly his background, and particularly the amount of time it took for a suspect to be named. So from that standpoint, LV, I find the case very intriguing, and I just commend law enforcement, because I do believe that this could have possibly been not just a mass murderer, which he is by definition, but also could have possibly been a fledgling serial killer.
Thomas wants to know, #for us both, did they scan his car for DNA or check tire tracks, have an expert check the tire tracks and match them to his car, or did they check his footprint, circle back to the store? I wanted to ask you about this. As far as the work that's going to be done on the car, and really just forensic work in general, this is still a very active investigation, is it not?
Absolutely. They had all of those search warrants to serve, and they had to go in with crime scene specialists and extract any and all fingerprints, DNA, fibers, blood evidence, you name it, from those locations. And I would believe that in that vehicle, even though we know it was cleaned once, I would believe it was cleaned prior to his father getting into that car because of the blood that would have been there, that this evidence will be recovered if indeed he did do this crime. As you mentioned, the tire tracks, that evidence will be reviewed, footprints to match back to the van's footprint. It will all be reviewed in great detail.
How about this one? This one, we could probably spend we could probably do an hour on this one question. But we'll use this as a transition point from Idaho to some of the other stories I want to cover while we have you here in the Stream Center. Autumn wants to know, #HJB, why do you think the public gravitates towards certain cases like this one, such as Gabby Petito, Delphi, etc.? I have an answer to this because I was actually talking about this over the weekend with a friend of mine. We were talking about why certain cases rise to a level of fascination and following, and some others don't. But I want to hear it from you first, Jennifer.
My belief is these victims were so relatable. We all have a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a relative, a good friend that is no different from these victims. And for that reason, combined with, initially at least, the safety factor, right? There was this mass murderer on the loose. But now pouring over to really the personalization, I find that audiences and public at large, we all really care. And we're touched by these losses. And that's why I think this one touched everybody.
Relatability is big. When people can relate to the hardships of others, there's so many different cases that we could break down when it comes to relatability. The thing to me, why certain stories rise to that level where people are following it day and night, such as Petito, such as Delphi, I think it's because people cannot wrap their minds around a couple of key questions, such as why did this happen? How could something like this happen? And who could be responsible for something like this? There's always that one massive question that exists over the top of every case, right? And for the one with Gabby Petito and Bryan Laundries, I think that the fundamental question earlier on with that one is, how are these two on a cross-country road trip together so happy, and then one is missing, and then the other is back in Tampa Bay with her vehicle, and she's missing when they're supposed to be engaged to spend the rest of their lives together? That's the big one there. When we're talking about Ana Walshe, that's the next one we're going to introduce here in a moment. How does a mother of three young boys, all three of her children now between the ages of 2 and 6, how does a mother on New Year's Day just completely vanish out of thin air, and who could be responsible for something like that? And then, with the Idaho case, who goes into a house and savagely murders somebody in the middle of the night for college students? The question always is unanswerable, and that's what I think makes it one that people just can't wrap their brains around the answer as to what really went on with that particular story. I mean, that's how I see it, but relatability and answering these questions and also discussing what is going on in real time, that's a really big part of what we do. I want to move on now. Jennifer, you've been following the Ana Walshe story. What do you make of it?
Well, that is a case really with only one legitimate prime suspect. We have a husband who had the opportunity. He was on house confinement, ready to get charged in a federal matter. He lied about when she disappeared. He lied to investigators about his, I would believe, getting lost, going to his mother's house. He lied about not going to the Home Depot. He Also in the house was found a knife, apparently somewhat distorted with blood. In addition, there were sacks of trash that were found with indicia of the crime, including a hacksaw. He Googled how to get rid of a 115-pound body, how to dismember a body. Things are pretty much pointing in his direction investigatively, in my mind. And I think the reason we have this hiatus of quietness from law enforcement is they're strictly trying to get these DNA profiles developed from what was found in that trash and cross-reference them with Mr. Walsh's and Mrs. Walsh's DNA that I think we're going to find on much of that evidence.
What is it like being an investigator waiting for DNA tests to come back? What is that like? Honestly, I want like your unfiltered response when you are waiting for that forensic work to come back.
I'm telling you, I had those lab specialists, and they're amazing. PhDs, many of them. They've spent their whole lives studying what they do. They study under other people who have studied it for years and done it for years. So these people are really amazing at what they do. And I had them on speed dial and bothered them probably way too much. When I send something up to the Quantico lab, you send it via an EC back in the day, an Airtel, if it was important, a teletype. And then it got assigned. So I would look who was going to get assigned to this. Then I'd look them up and I called them. And you establish a relationship with them. Oftentimes when something would go in, I would request that analyst. But hopefully you get a relationship going. And even before their reports are done, you would know. You would know whether you had it or you didn't.
So is there, I want the real answer to this question, okay? I want the real answer. When it comes to pushing for results, is as I understand it, the way the forensic labs works is that there's a log. There's a log of tests that they have to do. Is there any getting your case to the front of the line? Is there expediting the process when it comes to forensics?
There is certainly expediting under certain circumstances. This case, everything involved was expedited. This is a case where there was a mass murder at large, and the public safety always comes first.
Which case are you talking about now? You're talking about...
Oh, I'm sorry. I switched back to Kohberger.
You're making sure you're talking about Idaho. Yeah, that's okay.
I switched back to Kohberger. In this case... Yes. So, I'm sorry. Let me move back to Walsh.
But that's interesting, though, too, is what you're saying is that with Idaho, there is likely... when that high profile 100%. Of a case, you move it to the front of the list. Yeah. You move it to the top of the pile.
A case like that is at the front. Moving to Ana, it's a little bit different because Bryan Walshe is incarcerated right now. Mm-hmm. He's not a threat to his children, to the public, to anyone, and he's not going anywhere. But they certainly are doing their best to expedite, but nothing like it would have been expedited in the Bryan Kohberger matter.
Do you think investigators have any doubt that they have the person responsible for it, given what has come out with his makeup, his profile, some of the history that they had, some of the marital history that they have, some of the troubles that were occurring behind the scenes, his makeup being called a sociopath, of course, his relationship with his father being made a lot of in headlines and in the news. Do you think investigators have any doubt that they have, is it now just going through the paces to make sure that the evidence points to the conclusion that they have foreseen in their minds?
Yeah, they have to. Yes. First of all, investigators believe this is their man. Secondarily to that, the prosecutor has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt and likely, or at least possibly, without a body. And so they would like to tie in that DNA. Obviously, they can also just put together this circumstantial case, but it's not near as strong, JB, as if they have that DNA. But I always loved to get this question when I was on the stand. And every once in a while, a defense attorney would make the mistake to say, well, Jennifer, do you think they're guilty? And I would always say, 100%. I would not be here testifying against someone I thought was innocent. So while you maintain the presumption of innocence legally, many people who are presumptively innocent are not.
Very interesting. let's say a quick hello really quickly. We're about to transition on to our third and final story that we're talking about on stream. We were right pre-stream. We were talking about Duty Ron, and he's in our comment section right now, and
Duty Ron.
Just saying hello to him, a warm hello to him. Of course, his channel is fantastic, and really appreciate him joining us in our comment section. Look forward to circling back with him and talking with him a little bit more as well. We're gonna now go and pivot to the third and final story we're gonna be talking about here on this live stream with Jennifer Coffindaffer, former FBI agent, joining us here in the Stream Center, and we're talking about the Gabby Petito Bryan Laundries story, and there has been reporting that I have done over the last several weeks about this letter that exists. Now, I have it confirmed from both sides, and hopefully I'll be able to break this down in a way so if you're kind of a little bit behind the curve, so to speak, or behind the headlines when it comes to this story, I'll try to get you up to speed here. Bryan Laundrie, we don't know whether or not he received this letter, but I have it confirmed from both sides that this letter does in fact exist because it was collected as FBI evidence. A letter that was authored by Roberta Laundrie, meant for Bryan Laundrie, and this is the letter that was encased in some sort of an envelope of some kind. It said on it, "Burn after you read this." That was basically, in essence, the big letters that were the big message tied to this letter. And the letter, as it has been revealed through court documents, is that this letter contained details about a shovel and helping bury a body. Now, this goes back to when this story was the story across the country, when people were gravitating towards this story, people who believed that the Laundries were well aware of everything that was going on and that they weren't talking, and it was for the reason of that they knew so much and they didn't want to say what they knew. Of course, that they were dealing with everything that was going on in real time with Bryan Laundrie's disappearance, and then, of course, when his remains were found. But the big thing here is that this letter does, in fact, exist. It was FBI evidence. The FBI collected this evidence over the course of their investigation, a letter that Roberta is said to have wrote to Bryan, and we hope to get this letter at some point, just like we got the confession from Bryan Laundrie, the 8 pages in the notebook. But this letter that Roberta wrote to Bryan that says something about a shovel and helping bury a body. Stephen Bertolino, the attorney for the Laundrie family, has indicated to us, as I just check my phone, make sure I'm not getting any text messages from anybody watching the stream right now. Stephen Bertolino has communicated to us that the letter does exist. They do have it. It's still in their possession. It hasn't been destroyed. It's of course, it's been mentioned in this lawsuit that exists between the two families, but that the letter itself doesn't have anything to do with the Gabby Petito case, and that it predates everything. And I asked very specifically to Pat Riley, the attorney for the Petito and Schmidt families, is there any date or any mention specifically of Gabby Petito or anything that tells us what time frame this was written in? And the answer is no. So the FBI had this evidence. And the question is, people have been asking me repeatedly on social media when I post about this story, is that why the FBI didn't pursue charges against Chris and Roberta Laundrie, the mother and father of Bryan Laundrie.
Well, this was the problem, I believe. Currently, they need to show a preponderance of the evidence. And this letter in and of itself should push them over. It was very convenient that there was no date on that letter, so Mr. Bertolino can again shuck and jive and try to say that that letter related to something that had nothing to do with Gabby Petito, even though it says burn after reading, and even though she was murdered viciously, and it involved a shovel, and I mean, it's just ridiculous, honestly. But the Bureau and the prosecution team, the United States Attorney, would have had to prove beyond any doubt. And my question would be, was this letter even ever given to Bryan Laundrie? Did it end up in his hands?
Let's say it didn't. Let's say it didn't. Let's say the FBI uncovers this evidence and it's a letter that Roberta meant to give to her son, Bryan, and it contains details about a shovel and the burying of a body, even if it's not delivered to Bryan, is that people would ask, well, isn't that proof that they were aware of Gabby's murder all along, and that they were, withholding information from investigators and so on and so forth?
Well, certainly that they were withholding information, certainly that they had knowledge, but they are entitled to their Fifth Amendment right. And they never made false statements to law enforcement. If they would have, we'd be, I believe they would have been charged, but they never said anything. And so therefore, the charge just didn't exist to charge just based on that letter.
If the FBI has the evidence and they believe that a crime was committed, and they have the evidence that concludes that a crime was committed, they're going to proceed with charges, right? I mean, the fact
100%.
that they had this evidence in their possession and then discharged it back to Stephen Bertolino, who gave it back to the families, or still has it in his possession, as I understand it. So that there's no, they were going to, if they could have proceeded with criminal charges, they would have.
Exactly. If Dick Ludwig, who was my mentor for 10 years, old crusty Hoover guy, and when I first studied underneath him, if you will, first came up as a baby agent underneath him, he would call me into his office when I had a case and predicated that I thought we should move forward on. And he'd tell me, listen, you go get the CFRs, go get the law. And we would break down each aspect of the law that, based on the predication of the facts I had, related to that law. And that's what some people don't understand. You have to go back to the law, whether it's harboring, whether it's aiding and abetting, which were the possibilities in this case, accessory, conspiracy. You need to look up each of those and then ask yourself, based on just this letter, did that meet the legal standard in those possible crimes? And in this case, it did not.
We have to wrap up our live stream here shortly. But the other question that I get all the time, and I'll bring up Sue's comment here on screen, and talking about the Laundries and a conviction. But here's the thing. The Laundries, up until this point, make this very clear. The Laundries Chris and Roberta have never been faced with a charge. They've never been charged with anything in relation to the Bryan Laundrie investigation, the Gabby Petito investigation. But people have also asked me, Jennifer, this civil lawsuit, the civil trial is looming, and people are interested, of course, in the evidence that gets presented at trial. And people have asked me all the time, if in a civil trial, if evidence is brought to light that is criminal in nature, can the FBI reopen the investigation and proceed with criminal charges against, just in general? Not even just with this case, just in general.
If there were something new that came forward as a part of this proceeding, absolutely it could be used. And I do want to also say, I think the Petito and Schmitz have a great case, and I just hope justice is served in this case, JB, because that's a family, and particularly Nikki, who I've communicated with against it. I can't imagine bearing the burden she's had to bear, which is the loss of her daughter, and the grace which this family has handled this tragedy. And I'm glad that there is an avenue for them to get justice.
I want to highlight this last comment from Kat. JB, Jennifer, both mentioned here in this. I'll read the question. So if Bertolino claims the letter has absolutely nothing to do with the Gabby case, why doesn't he just put it out to the public? I asked for the letter. I asked for it with basically the same exact kind of, if it's inconsequential, then why don't you just put it out to the public? If it's going to potentially come out at trial, why? I've been told that he is not going to release it. That's basically what I've been told. But Kat's thinking here is very along the lines of many others. If Stephen Bertolino says the letter has nothing to do with the Gabby Petito case, then I think it was as it was described to me, and I apologize if I'm shortening this, but the way Bertolino described it to me was, this is a letter that exists between a mother and a son. We're not going to be releasing it. That's basically, in essence, what he said. So, Jennifer, I'd like to really thank you. We only have a few more minutes, and we got to do something for broadcast television here in just a minute. I want to give you the opportunity. It has been great to see you pop up on Cuomo's show on News Nation, great on Fox News as well. Of course, you're always tweeting out, sharing nuggets with the cases that you follow. Just want to give you the opportunity to share any ways people can follow you in some of the cases that you're following, and more about you.
Oh, no, I would just say thank you, JB, to your audience. Your audience has always just been the best, not only with questions, but with insight. I love the Twitter community. I always say this. They are on top of these cases. They sleuth and look, and I mean that in the most positive way, because they're not trying to get anything out of it other than the truth. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we're all looking for. So just thank you to anybody listening right now and anyone following. And I'm at hashtag Coffindaffer FBI.
All right. Jennifer Coffindaffer joining us in the Stream Center. We're going to be hopping off stream. We would love to stay on stream longer, but of course, schedule crunch here today. The latest on missing mother, Ana Walshe, on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. We have reports on all three of the stories that we talked about here on this live stream. You can go over to our website or app, and also sign up for push alerts on the WFLA app, but also here on social media as well. I'm also starting to do now work on TikTok. I have a TikTok following, Instagram following. Folks, please, you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram. We're going to be doing some cool content on those platforms, specific to those platforms as well. YouTube live streaming is over the course of an hour to an hour and a half, more like 90 minutes. TikTok and Instagram, the content is more condensed down to more like 90 seconds. So we'll be sharing a lot of content on those platforms. You can find me at WFLAJB. One more time, an enormous thank you to Jennifer Coffindaffer for joining us here live on stream. Give her a follow on social. And as always, the very latest on WFLA.com, the WFLA app.